Landon. This is the second video in a 3-video series on caregiver support groups. And in this video, we want to show you a recreation of a real group. Unfortunately, it won't be an in-person group because with COVID, we still aren't able to gather together. But during COVID, we've been conducting a number of Zoom caregiver groups and have found they're much more successful than I thought they would be. So that's what you're going to get to watch today. These are all real caregivers who have been through the process and are still going through their journeys. So take a moment and watch them, and then we will talk in the third video about the way I conduct groups. You'll see me conducting this group. Thank you. We like to start with what the rules are, and the rules are pretty simple. We like to keep these meetings confidential. This is only between us. If you ever get together or want to go have coffee and talk about what happens in the group, that's fine. We just don't want people outside the group to even know we're here. I mean, some of our family members may not even know about the things that we talk about here. We also want to let each person have an opportunity to speak. We want to be very careful and not give advice to each other, because all we're doing is telling our experiences with our stories, and those help others, and they help us when we express those stories. My job is mostly just to see that everybody gets to participate and everyone is included and feels safe. So also when we have a new person join the group, we like to let that person go last so they can kind of get to know what we're like. And we'll go around the room and just introduce ourselves for a minute or two. And then we'll come back to you, Melanie, and see what brought you here today and see what's going on in your world. Let me start with myself. I lost my wife about 2 years ago to dementia. It was a 10-year journey. It was one of the most difficult things I've done in my life. But I stayed with it, and I joined some groups a long time ago. And I've been facilitating groups for about 7 or 8 years since then. I find it really valuable to take my experience and try to pass it on to others. But it definitely was a very difficult time. And without my friends, without the people in this group now, it would have been much more difficult. So I'm glad you're here, Melanie, and I'm eager to hear about your story.
Thank you.
Cheryl, tell us a little about your history.
Okay, Melanie, my caregiver journey started about 7 years ago. That was when Jim was diagnosed with dementia. Now, it didn't change our lives a whole lot right then. I mean, we still did the same things. We played golf and we went places. We even did a few trips, and we did one very smart thing. We created a power of attorney and a medical power of attorney. And this turned out to be very, very beneficial because in November of 2018, Jim had a stroke and our life was never the same after that. He required, at that point, he required 27 care. He could not be left alone for a minute. He was very difficult to deal with. There was no doubt about that. I joined a support group, much like this one, and he was accepted into the PACE program. And I think it was those two things that really saved me. 2 years went by and I was absolutely worn out. I felt like I could not go on one more minute. That summer, our children came and helped me with him. But at the end of the summer, we all agreed that the care facility was our only answer. And so when that happened, my job as a caregiver changed. And I wasn't a 24/7 caregiver anymore. I was more like an advocate. And I had to be sure at that point that he was getting the proper care And that went on pretty well. But then I think one of the other things that it allowed me to do was I was no longer wore out, and I had the energy and I had the time to create moments of joy for him. So welcome, Melanie. I'm sure you'll be glad you did.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cheryl. Bill,
Well, thank you. Hello, Melanie. I'm glad you're here. My journey started in 2009. My wife was a mental health counselor. She was a mental health counselor in Montrose for 35 years. In 2009, she had a diagnosis that she had a stroke, and she was exhibiting mild cognitive behavioral problems. Some memory loss, but not a great deal. She could still practice, and because she took terrific notes at every session. Eventually, the memory, her short-term memory started dissipating more. And in 2014, she basically had to retire. And at that point, her behavior and her dementia started increasing. It got to be where I was a 24/7 monitor and caregiver for CL. And because she didn't have a time clock, she could get up any time of the day or night and go prowling around, and no telling what she would get into or what she would create. But she began creating unsafe conditions for both of us. I was afraid the house was going to burn down, or she was going to get severely injured, or I was going to get severely injured. And the straw that broke the camel's back was one day she came in and she had a packet of decon mice poison. She was snacking out of it. And I made the decision right then to pull the trigger and place her at Colorado Care Center. I'd had everything basically in place. I placed her on Medicaid. We had powers of attorney and a new will. And I talked with the people at Colorado, and they had a spot for her. And that was a very fearful day for me when I took her over there. I didn't know how that was going to go, but she was accepted, and she seemed to feel like she was comfortable there. And she's been there for 4 years as of yesterday. And I'm sure she is still safe, comfortable, healthy, and happy, and experiences moments of joy. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell, and I'm sorry for my dogs.
how are you feeling now, Bill?
I'm feeling great. I feel like I was having guilt. I had guilt for several months. And the day I came home from taking CL out to Colorado was the loneliest day of my life. I came home, sat down on the sofa. I didn't get up until the next morning. It was a surreal experience. But, and there was grief, a different kind of grief that I was undergoing, mixed in with guilt. And thanks to my friends in my support group, I received validation and comfort and encouragement. And I wouldn't trade the experience for anything.
That's great.
I moved to Montrose about 19 years ago, and I had been working in other states, and my first grandson was born here. And I worked with the PACE program and the VOA program in Valley Manor. At that time, it became clear my parents were losing their ability to keep a home, to manage their finances. And it was about an 8-hour drive to where they lived. So I worked with my brother, or tried to work with my brother, and we decided to have them sell the home and move into little patio homes where there was some oversight. And they were okay for a couple of years. And then my father got more and more demented. So I brought them up here, and they were able to stay in Heidi's, which is an assisted living, for a couple of years. And then my father's dementia had made it impossible for him to stay there. So they went to he went to a memory care unit. And about a year later, she went to Valley Manor as just a regular patient. I didn't know for a while until I got involved with the PACE program in Region 10 that there were such things as caregivers. And there were such things as caregiver supporters. And it kind of opened a door for me that I hadn't experienced for years, and came to know some of the people in the community that started support groups. And I've just been so blessed by having that type of help. And my father passed, and my mother was still alive, and it was so helpful to have caregivers who could support and validate my feelings. And I've gone on to want to do that for others, as the rest of us on this video have. So it's a nice group to have. It's confidential, it's supportive, it's shared stories, maybe some shed tears, but it helps keep us up.
Thank you, Rhonda. Melanie, we talked on the phone just a little bit before you came, and it would be really nice to hear what your challenges are and how you've come to see us.
Oh, well, I thank you so much for letting me become involved. And I found out about you through my husband's care facility at Horizon in Eckerd. They gave me Laird's name and number, and I surely appreciate that. Well, my story is that my husband has been diagnosed with Parkinson's for several years, but the truth of the matter, I think it started quite a while ago with anxiety attacks, and he was on medication for a long time, since about 2007. And then when COVID hit, we're both retired, and we're in our own home, and that I was able to navigate that. But we have a large home, and in 2008, I had a severe stroke that took my whole left side, and I'm very blessed because I've gotten everything back except the function of my foot, and so I wear a brace. But I can walk and drive, and I was involved in the stroke support group. I volunteered at St. Mary's for about 5 years, and then there's a wonderful stroke support group in Montrose that I was active in for a long time. So through COVID, I did everything, cleaned the house and did the groceries and whatnot. And that we did that for 6 months till the fall of 2020. And at that time, my daughter was here visiting from Seattle. I have 2 daughters, one in Portland, one in Seattle. And she was here because Sky had fallen and hurt his shoulder, and he couldn't get up the stairs, even though we have 2 banisters. And so it was time for us to stay in a bedroom that we had created on the first floor. Because of my stroke, we have a handicapped bathroom with a roll-in shower, and so we thought we were pretty much had it covered then. And then the Lord sent us a wonderful caregiver, Ed, who would come every morning and help get Sky dressed. And he'd gotten to the point, well, he was wearing support hose or socks, and they were very difficult to get on. He couldn't do it. And I could do it, but then by that time I was about toast. And I was having trouble getting him to go in and get changed to go to bed. And that at night he would get so weak that he was really having trouble navigating. And so having Ed there helped immensely. And so that went along for about six months until the spring of 2021. And in a matter of that same daughter was back for us for Easter, and things were getting pretty dicey. We had finally gotten Sky a wheelchair so that we could get him back in the bedroom if he got too tired and get him around. But then he got to the point where within 3 or 4 days, he got so weak he could not stand. We could not get him to the bathroom. We couldn't even get him to stand to use a urinal. We couldn't get him out of bed. He was starting to have delusions and confusion about where he was and what the deal was. And so she started reaching out and seeing about a placement. And between Wednesday and Friday, we were able to get him placed he's at Horizon Care Center in Eckerd. But that was, and my other daughter came. So that was not a good day. That was hard. That was really hard. But the family was all together, and we were doing all we could. And I knew that we were doing all we could. So that's kind of our story. And he can't stand to do any of his transfers. They use a hydraulic lift to stand to, or sit to stand, I guess is what they call it. And it takes 2 people to do that. And but he can still feed himself pretty much. It's not great, but he is having a confusion. It comes and goes. There's kind of scenarios, and around that, other than that, he's pretty good. He keeps wanting to come home, of course, and we, because of our caregiver, we're able to bring him home when Ed can go out there and get him. And the family was all here for Christmas. There's just I have 2 daughters and their husbands and 1 grandson that's 14. So, but that was wonderful. And because Ed was willing to work Christmas Eve and Christmas, he could go out and get him transferred in the car and get him into the house. But the facility will not transfer him into the car because he's so fragile. Because his orders state that he has to use that machine, and they won't take the machine outside. So we're at the mercy of whenever our caregiver can work. So that's kind of the deal. It's just rocking along, but it's sure hard. It's hard on your heart to watch it.
You mentioned, Melanie, that he keeps wanting to come home. And I think we all know that. And it creates a lot of guilt in us that he's there, we're here, he wants to come home, he doesn't understand. That's particularly difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it just makes it hard. He just doesn't really, at some level, he doesn't really understand where he is. And he has a lot of confusion about it. He'll say, well, he'll call and say, well, now, where are you? And I say, I'm at the house. Well, which house? Well, we only have one house. and things like that. And even though he comes here at least every other week, and in the summer we would go on rides, and that was pleasant. But his core strength is diminishing to the point where he's having trouble just staying in his wheelchair.
Carol, were there a lot of days when Jim wanted to come home as well? Does he still ask to come home?
That has subsided. At first he did, but now he's very, very, very content there. When I brought him home from the hospital after his stroke, he didn't believe that we lived in this house. And I would put him, he would insist that we go find out where he lived. And I would put him in the car and we would drive up and down the street looking for where he thought he lived. And it's just part of the disease. It certainly is. And he has gotten to the point now, though, he doesn't talk about coming home anymore. So that makes it easier for me.
My
Yeah.
wife wanted to come home for more than a year. And then after a little more than a year, she said to one of the people working there, I guess this is my home now. But it's really hard on us, isn't it? When we want to be with them and yet we can't bring them home and we're hurting their feelings every time. It was very difficult getting my wife into the facility. And once she was in, I went back to visit the next day and I peeked through the little window in the door. And there she was sitting on a bench, just like a little girl waiting to go to school and waiting for the school bus. And she had all of her clothes folded up and was ready to come home. And I went in and she grabbed my wrists and said, "Take me home." And it just ripped my heart out. I would have liked to have taken her home, but
It's tough.
this is where she needed to be.
Mhm. I can certainly relate to that.
I'm blessed in that respect. My wife, CL, has never asked to come home or asked me to bring her home. And I don't know if I could deal with that. That's tough.
It'd be hard.
However, when I take Sky, either bring him home or take him on a ride, even though we get back to Horizon, he'll say, "Well, I don't want to go in." And I said, "I know," but he hasn't ever thrown a fit. He kind of gets mad. He's unhappy. He gets unhappy at Ed, but it hasn't been a difficulty, and we're very blessed. We realize that we're very blessed because of that.
It
Good.
seems like there's a common thread here, isn't it? But it seems like we all came to a point where it wasn't a good idea to keep our loved one at home anymore, assuming we had other alternatives. And it's hard on everybody when you have to do that.
Yes, we kind of feel like we failed though. We wanted to do this forever, but we can't, and we have to realize that. But it is, you used the word grief, Bill, earlier, and it is, we're grieving.
Oh yes, it is grief. It is grief.
Yeah, it is.
And I find that over time, I'm resolved a little more to living at home. That's the other thing, is because I have some disability and I'm not all that sure on my feet. And so living in alone, we'd been married 52 years. I've never lived alone. And so that's kind of coming along a little bit. And I have other support. I also have a life coach that I meet with every month, and we set goals and talk about things, and then my daughters are wonderful. I'm very blessed. We have, thank goodness, we have long-term care insurance, so I don't have that stress, and we're very blessed.
Yeah.
Melanie, I can relate to you when you talk about living alone. I had somewhat the same thing happen to me because I've been married, it would be 51 years. And I got married when I was really, really young. And so I went from my parents' house to my spouse's house. And then I 2 days after Jim was in nursing care, I looked around and I thought, this is the first time I've ever been alone, ever. It's shocking. It's hard.
I was surprised at how hard it was because, I've seen many people do it and just didn't get it at all about how hard that is.
It's still hard.
Yeah, it is. Thank God my daughter lives with me, and she's a mental health counselor, like her mother. And I think I'm her best client. She's a blessing.
We do really have to reach out, don't we? We really realize that we can't be an island and be completely alone. One of the hard things about placing or even losing your loved one at the end of their lives is that we've not only lost somebody important to us, but we're now out of a job. And how do we fill that in? And I think it's cool, Melanie, that you're meeting with a life coach to sort of say, okay, what do I do now? You're not just wallowing in it, but it's very difficult. We've all were married for a very long time, and to be without our loved ones is like, what do I do now?
It's so strange because when we're together at the facility, there's a lot of times that it just feels really normal, that just he will say things that are very normal. And this situation may go on for years for me. And I do go, it's a 15-minute drive, but that's not too bad. And I do go every day to see him and stay a couple hours or more sometimes. Depends on what we're doing.
Well, that must take quite a bit of your day, given your disability, to get ready and to go see him and then come back. Are you pretty tired when you come back?
Well, that's the lasting hardest part of my stroke is the fatigue, and I have a lot of fatigue. So yeah, I'm if I don't come back if I take him to dinner and don't leave till after 5, then I come home and it's dark and I'm done. But luckily, the caregiver, we have gone ahead and kept him, and he comes in and has replaced my house cleaner, keeper, the yard man, and the handyman. And he's just wonderful. But right now he's sick, and I don't know if he has the flu or if he has COVID. I haven't seen him since Friday. He should have been here today, but he called and he didn't sound good at all. So I stripped my bed, which is a queen. I can do that. And so I had to go up and put the bottom sheet on, which with my king size beds, I just can't do that. But I have other people I could, if I got up against it, I could call. So.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. I wanted to
Thank you.
Save some time for the rest. Bill, Cheryl, Rhonda, is there anything that's been going on since we met last that's been a challenge, or some funny thing that happened, or some experience with a healthcare worker that you want to share?
Not really a funny thing, but Jim, of course, is in the Gunnison Care Center, and it's a lovely place. I love it. And we had to put him there because when we placed him, there were no beds in Montrose. So my drive is an hour and 15 minutes when I go to see him. That I don't mind, except that now they have lots of COVID showing up in the facility. And so they're not telling me I can't come. They're telling me that they prefer that I not come until they get it under control again. So, and it's not amongst the residents, it's amongst the workers mostly. So, you know, it's bad enough walking the path of being a caregiver, but to do it with COVID makes it 10 times worse. That's all I got to say. 10 times worse.
Were you prohibited from visiting at all during COVID, Cheryl?
Okay, I was very fortunate because they constructed a visitor center, which was not a part of the facility, but it had the proper ventilation, had the proper heat. So I was always able to visit, but I could not visit inside. Now I can visit inside, I can visit in his room, and I can still do that. It's just that I want to cooperate. And if they're having problems with COVID outbreak, then it's probably okay for me not to see my husband for a week, 2 weeks, you know? It's my choice, of course, but I think it's the wise thing to do.
In Colorado and most of the other nursing homes locally, they, starting about March 2020, they shut all visitation down for months.
No, I got to visit him. That was wonderful. And in the summertime, they have lovely big courtyards that we were able to visit in, and I could bring almost the whole family. I could bring 8 people in to that courtyard, and we celebrated his birthday there, and we had lots of moments of joy last summer in that courtyard.
Good.
Very good. Very good. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. I know that this Zoom kind of meeting isn't as natural as it is we're sitting around the table. And yet, when COVID started and we were forced to do this because we normally meet at the hospital, and the hospital said, no, nobody that doesn't have to be here can be here. It kind of pushed us all into doing Zoom. And while it is not the same, it's very good. It does allow us to spend time with each other, and it's social time. And I'm hoping that after COVID is history, there are still opportunities to do Zoom grief meetings. We live in a small community in Western Colorado, and yet I think there's a lot of good that can be done by hooking up to people all over the country. So maybe there'll be other opportunities to do Zoom meetings like this with a lot of other people. But I want to thank you for coming today. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And again, you're free to call and talk to each other for help. And you can call me at any time you like. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you,
You're
Melanie.
welcome anytime.
you.
Lovely. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.